Welcome back, dear listener, to another quiet walk through the shadows of the past. Whether the night has just begun for you, or sleep is softly approaching, I'm grateful that you've chosen to spend this moment here with me. Tell me in the comments, are you listening from a distant, peaceful place, or from the heart of a city slowly winding down? And if these gentle journeys through forgotten stories bring you comfort, please consider subscribing. There are countless more voices from the past still waiting to be heard. But tonight's story isn't just about smoking. It's about addiction, ambition, and the intoxicating allure of sin itself. Because in the roaring 1920s, cigarettes weren't just tobacco wrapped in paper. They were symbols of liberation, tools of seduction, and for many of Hollywood's brightest women, a gateway to a world of excess that would eventually consume them whole. What I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you think you know about Hollywood's golden age. These weren't actresses simply playing roles. They were real women, trapped between the glamorous personas they created on screen and the demons they battled off camera. The stories I'm about to share were buried in studio archives, hidden in private letters, and whispered about in dark corners of Hollywood for nearly a century. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how cigarettes became the perfect metaphor for everything dangerous and alluring about 1920s Hollywood. And how the women who smoked them paid a price that went far beyond their health. You'll meet the stars who turned smoking into an art form. The studios that profited from their addictions. And the society that both celebrated and condemned their rebellion. Before we dive into these individual stories, let's step back to Hollywood, circa 1923. The film industry was still young, still wild, and barely beginning to define its own rules. There were no publicists carefully crafting perfect images. No rehab clinics waiting in the wings. And certainly no understanding of addiction as we know it today. What there was an influx of young, ambitious women. Most of them from small American towns. Arriving in Los Angeles with nothing but talent and determination. They came chasing a dream, only to discover that the dream demanded everything in return. In a city where image was everything and excess was expected. The studios controlled their lives down to the smallest detail. What they wore, who they dated, even how they smiled for photographs. But there was one small act of rebellion the studios couldn't control. What these women chose to put between their lips. And set on fire. Enter Clara Bow, the original it girl of Hollywood. She didn't just smoke cigarettes, she performed with them. Born into poverty in Brooklyn, Clara clawed her way to stardom by 21. But fame, as she would learn, came with a cost no one had warned her about. The pressure to remain the wild, carefree girl America adored began to bleed into her real life. Cigarettes became her constant companion, through 16-hour filming days and sleepless nights filled with champagne and chaos. To the public, her smoking looked effortless, glamorous even. She would light a cigarette with theatrical flair. Hold it between manicured fingers. And deliver biting one-liners to reporters who adored her. But behind the flashbulbs, Clara was chain-smoking through anxiety attacks. Using nicotine to numb hunger and exhaustion. Because the studios demanded she remain impossibly thin. By 1925, she was smoking 3 packs a day. The same magazines that called her dangerously modern were unknowingly chronicling her quiet descent into addiction. And Clara, young and isolated, didn't yet understand that she was becoming the product of her own performance. Across town, another star was waging a quieter war. Pola Negri, the Polish-born actress who brought European sophistication to Hollywood's rough edges. Smoked with a grace that made other women look amateur. But behind that elegance lay loneliness. Pola had begun smoking as a teenager in Poland. And when she arrived in Hollywood in 1922, her cigarette became a symbol of her exotic appeal. Directors wrote entire scenes around her smoldering glances and perfect exhales of smoke. What audiences never saw was how cigarettes became her comfort in a city that treated her as both fascinating and foreign. The studios loved her mystery, but kept her at a distance. Pola smoked to calm her nerves, to fill the silences between takes, and to keep from feeling utterly alone. She tried to quit several times. Each time, producers begged her not to, claiming her image depended on it. Hollywood had built her fame on addiction. And she found herself trapped, torn between her health and her career. Meanwhile, in the glittering world of studio parties, cigarettes became the ultimate social currency. Among the guests stood Marion Davies, actress and companion to media tycoon William Randolph Hearst. Her relationship with cigarettes was inseparable from her relationship with power. In a world where women were often silenced, lighting a cigarette was her declaration of independence. She would smoke during meetings with businessmen twice her age. Her gesture wordlessly saying, "I belong here too." But cigarettes were also how she bonded with other women trapped in the same gilded cage. In dressing rooms and quiet corners of studio lots, Marion and other actresses would share cigarettes and secrets. A silent sisterhood in an industry built to consume them. They were literally inhaling something that would one day consume them in return. By the mid-1920s, cigarettes had become more than habit, they were identity. The right cigarette, held the right way, could make a woman appear sophisticated, independent, modern. Yet this rebellion was carefully contained. Society allowed women to smoke, but only if they did so with grace, restraint, and beauty. Too much smoke, too much attitude, and you became scandalous. Too little, and you were invisible. This paradox defined a generation of actresses. Women who lived between rebellion and respectability, freedom and control. If the 1920s had a queen of poise, it was Gloria Swanson. To millions, she was the embodiment of elegance, the woman who made smoking look like art. Her cigarette holders became iconic. Every flick of her wrist, every exhale of smoke, seemed choreographed, a symbol of power and control. But beneath the glamour, Gloria's relationship with cigarettes was deeply personal. She used them to steady her nerves, to control her weight, and to give herself space to think before she spoke. In Hollywood, image was everything, and Gloria understood that better than anyone. Each photograph of her, smoking in satin gowns, in sportswear, or between takes, reinforced the illusion that she was untouchable. But in private, Gloria was fighting her own battles. The stress of maintaining her position as Hollywood's highest-paid actress, managing her business ventures, and keeping her reputation spotless in a gossip-hungry industry. All of it took a toll. The ritual of lighting a cigarette became her small act of calm amidst the chaos. What began as sophistication quietly became survival. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Gloria couldn't face the day without that thin trail of smoke curling between her fingers. Within just a few years, Hollywood had turned cigarettes from a luxury into a necessity. Addiction wasn't just common, it was profitable. Behind the velvet curtains and silver screens, studio executives realized something sinister. A slightly addicted actress was an obedient actress. Women who needed their cigarette breaks rarely argued about working hours. They didn't walk off set. They didn't question authority. The studios had quietly discovered a form of control that came wrapped in white paper and gold foil. This manipulation was deliberate. Executives would remove ashtrays from waiting rooms before meetings. Knowing they're anxious, nicotine-starved stars would grow restless. Then, with perfect timing, a studio head would offer them a cigarette. A calculated gesture of kindness that re-established control. Addiction had become a tool, a silent contract that bound the women of Hollywood to the system that owned them. Few embodied rebellion like Louise Brooks, the woman with the jet-black bob who became the symbol of 1920s defiance. She arrived in Hollywood from Kansas, full of fire and dreams of dancing. The studios adored her spirit, and quickly decided to tame it. A publicity manager handed her a cigarette one day and said, "It keeps you thin, darling, the camera will love you for it." What he didn't say was that the studio had a deal with a tobacco company. Every puff Louise took, on camera or off, was free advertising. Soon, she wasn't just smoking for herself. She was selling the image of the modern woman, beautiful, independent, and just a little dangerous. But that image became a cage. Behind the bright lights and applause, Louise was smoking 2 packs a day. Waking each morning with a cough that reminded her something inside was breaking. She once wrote that she felt like she lived in a beautiful prison, where her jailers offered her cigarettes through the bars. Fame had given her everything. Money, gowns, fame. But also a dependency that left her hollow. If Louise Brooks was rebellion, Theda Bara was pure seduction. She invented the archetype of the vamp, the dangerous woman who could destroy men with a glance. The studio called her the woman with 1,000 sinful eyes. But her real name was Theodosia Goodman, a shy girl from Cincinnati pretending to be an Egyptian temptress. Smoking was part of her costume. Publicity photos showed her surrounded by smoke. Lips painted crimson. Eyes half-lidded with mystery. Audiences believed she was dangerous. Theda knew she was only acting. But the act consumed her. To keep the illusion alive, she smoked constantly, in films, in interviews, even at breakfast. Every puff reminded her who she was supposed to be. In private letters, Theda wrote about feeling like she was disappearing inside the persona she had created. Smoking, she said, had become the only part of myself that feels real anymore. She understood the irony. That the very habit keeping her career alive was also slowly erasing her identity. But she couldn't stop. Because in Hollywood, truth was dangerous, and illusion was survival. As the decade burned on, women's cigarettes became symbols of both rebellion and restraint. Society was changing, the 19th Amendment had given women the right to vote. Fashion had liberated them from corsets. And the idea of female independence was catching fire. But Hollywood demanded that this independence remain beautiful. Women could be bold, but only the right kind of bold. A woman smoking was modern. Until she became too modern. It was a tightrope every actress walked. And no one walked it more carefully than Mae Murray. The platinum blonde dancer who ruled the mid-1920s. Mae treated smoking like performance art. Every movement was choreographed. Choosing her cigarettes like jewelry. Lighting them with golden lighters. Holding them just so. So that the camera adored her. To the world, she was effortless. In reality, she was exhausted. She smoked to calm her nerves before grueling dance scenes. She smoked to silence her hunger. She smoked because she was terrified that if she stopped, even for a moment, the illusion of perfection would shatter. Even her relationships became tangled in smoke. Lovers withheld cigarettes during fights. Producers timed her smoke breaks to control conversations. Every puff became part of a power struggle. May had turned her cigarettes into props of seduction, only to realize the men around her were using those same cigarettes to control her. In a world built on illusion, smoke had become a language. One spoken fluently by every woman who wanted to survive. By the late 1920s, cigarette smoke had become the fog that hung over every Hollywood party. The air itself seemed perfumed with temptation. And beneath that haze, careers were made and destroyed. At the infamous soirees of studio moguls like Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg, women smoked to steady trembling hands. To appear calm. To belong. Every flick of a lighter, every shared cigarette, was political. An actress might trade secrets in the glow of a match, or win a role over whispered smoke between cocktails. But that smoke was also suffocating. Women smiled through the fog, knowing that one wrong gesture, one careless word, could end everything. They shared cigarettes and secrets. Temporary alliances formed in the haze. But when the smoke cleared, they were alone again, competing for survival in a world that demanded beauty, silence, and obedience. As the years rolled on, the golden lights of Hollywood grew brighter, but the shadows behind them grew darker still. The world only saw the glittering smiles and flowing champagne. No one saw the trembling hands beneath the silk gloves, the red lipstick stained by tears and tobacco. The addiction wasn't just to cigarettes or gin. It was to attention, applause, and desire. For women in the 1920s film industry, survival meant playing a dangerous game. Studio bosses whispered promises in dark rooms. Cigarette smoke curled through the air as contracts were signed, and souls were quietly sold. Behind every glamorous photo shoot lay a night of silence, loneliness, and chemical escape. Some sought comfort in smoky jazz clubs, where the music drowned out their thoughts. Others fell into the hands of doctors who offered miracle powders, little white dreams in crystal bottles. The papers would write, "Starlet collapses at premiere." Fans would sigh, thinking she was simply tired. But those who truly knew Hollywood knew better. They knew the price of fame, the silent addiction that took lives behind the velvet curtains. And yet, among the ruins, a few women fought back. They broke free from contracts, lit their last cigarette, and walked away from the silver screen with nothing but dignity. They were branded as difficult, unstable, rebellious. But history remembers them differently, as the ones who refused to let their beauty be bought, or their bodies be broken. Because in that smoke-filled decade, every woman who dared to dream was caught between two worlds. The one the camera adored, and the one reality destroyed. She was once Hollywood's sweetheart. The kind of woman the camera adored, pale skin, deep red lips, and eyes that carried both innocence and danger. Her name was Clara Bow, and the studios built empires around her face. But Clara had a secret, the kind that burned as quietly as the cigarette in her hand. Every morning, she would sit in front of her mirror, her fingers trembling as she lit her first smoke of the day. Not out of pleasure, but out of survival. It wasn't just the nicotine she craved. It was the silence between takes, the brief moment where she could just be herself, not the woman the world wanted her to be. Her director, a man twice her age, used to whisper. And so she did. Even when her heart was breaking. Even when the studio told her she was too old at 29. even when she begged for roles that showed more soul than skin. When the silent film era ended, and the talkies began, her voice, soft and low, didn't fit the new Hollywood. The same men who had once called her gold, now called her forgettable. She faded quietly, her last film barely noticed. But if you watch it closely, if you pause just before the final scene, you'll see her eyes looking straight into the lens, as if trying to say something she never could. I was real. I mattered. Even if you forgot me. Across town, another woman refused to fade quietly. Her name was Ruby Monroe, the wild one. She danced barefoot at Gatsby's parties, drove fast cars, and laughed in the faces of the men who tried to own her. Ruby wasn't born into fame. She fought for it, clawed her way from a Chicago speakeasy to the silver screens of Los Angeles. And when the cameras rolled, she owned every frame. But rebellion came at a price. She smoked in public, cursed like a man, and refused to marry for publicity. The press called her immoral. The studios called her dangerous. And Ruby? She called it freedom. In one famous interview, when asked about her bad girl image, she smiled and said, "If a man drinks, smokes, and sins, he's charming. If a woman does the same, she's doomed. So let me be doomed beautifully." Her defiance made her a legend, and her loneliness made her human. She had lovers, scandals, and nights that blurred into oblivion. But as the 1930s dawned and the censors tightened their grip, Ruby disappeared too. Not because she was forgotten, but because she refused to change. The world moved on without her, but her shadow stayed. Painted on every woman who ever dared to live by her own rules. 2 women, 2 stories, and 1 truth. In the glittering age of Hollywood's birth, addiction wasn't always to drugs or fame. It was to escape. Escape from silence. Escape from control. Escape from the unbearable weight of beauty in a world that only loved the surface. The studios would polish their image. The tabloids would write their lies. And history would remember them as tragic or wild. But never free. By the mid-1930s, the golden glow of old Hollywood had turned into a harsh white light. The parties were bigger, the cameras sharper, and the lies more elegant. Every actress who walked into a studio was told the same thing. You're not just selling a movie, you're selling a dream. But dreams came with contracts. And those contracts came with cages. The women were told what to eat, what to wear, who to love, and when to smile. A single scandal could end a career overnight. A whisper of addiction could erase a lifetime of applause. And yet, behind every perfect photograph, there was pain hiding in plain sight. A trembling hand holding a cigarette. A nervous laugh between sips of gin. A desperate wish to just breathe without performing. The makeup covered their scars. The lights erased their wrinkles. And the audience applauded their illusions. But when the curtains closed and the music faded, they were left alone, with their cigarettes, their mirrors, and their memories. Not all bowed to the system. Some women, quiet, intelligent, unbroken, began to rewrite their fate. Jeanette Holloway, one of the earliest female screenwriters, used her pen like a weapon. In smoky hotel rooms, she wrote stories that the studios rejected, stories about women who wanted power, not pity. She never became a household name. But her words slipped into the cracks of the industry, inspiring other women to tell their truth. Then came actresses who demanded to direct, to own, to lead. Women who didn't want to be muses, they wanted to be makers. And though many were silenced, their rebellion built the foundation of everything that came after. Every woman who stood behind a camera. Every actress who refused to play the same shallow role again, owed a small part of her courage to those forgotten rebels of the 1920s. Hollywood today sparkles brighter than ever. Neon lights replace chandeliers. Streaming screens replace silver ones. But the ghosts of the past still wander. The same smoke, the same sacrifices, the same seductions dressed in modern clothes. For every woman chasing fame today, there is a reflection of Clara Bow's trembling smile, or Ruby Monroe's defiant laugh. Echoes of lives that burned too fast, and too beautifully, to last. The cameras may have changed, but the price of beauty has not. And yet, their legacy lives on. In every woman who dares to speak her truth. In every artist who refuses to be silenced. In every story that shows a woman not as decoration, but as fire. Because even after a century, Hollywood still smells faintly of cigarettes and sin. And the women who lit those flames will never truly die. Decades have passed. The reels that once captured their faces now gather dust in the dark corners of film archives. The photographs are yellowed, the ink fading. But the emotion, the power, the haunting beauty of those women, that never fades. Sometimes, in the quiet halls of old theaters, you can almost hear the faint crackle of a projector. And for a moment, they live again. Clara Bow, with her trembling grace, appears on the screen, her eyes glistening with something real, something deeper than fame. Ruby Monroe, wild and unashamed, laughs into the smoke. As if she knows the future will finally understand her rebellion. They were more than actresses. They were mirrors of a generation's hunger. Its darkness, its deceit, its desire to escape the ordinary. They were women who dared to exist in a world that demanded perfection. Who dared to feel too much. To want too much. To dream too much. Hollywood called them fallen. But history will remember them as the first to rise. Glamour, that beautiful lie. A shimmering mask made of powder and pain. To the world, it looked effortless. But behind the glow was exhaustion, heartbreak, and hunger. They starved for beauty. They smoked for calm. They drank for silence. And still, they smiled. Because in those days, a woman's tears weren't poetic. They were inconvenient. The cameras wanted perfection. The producers wanted obedience. And the audience wanted fantasy. So they gave the world what it wanted, even if it destroyed them in the process. And yet, through that destruction, something sacred survived. Their courage. For every woman who came after. From the silver screen to the streaming era. Their silent rebellion became the foundation of truth in art. Every tear that once went unseen gave birth to 1,000 stories yet to be told. There's something almost spiritual about the women of that era. They carried tragedy like perfume, and hope like a hidden wound. Some found redemption, quietly marrying, disappearing into small towns, raising families that never knew their names once shone in light. Others never escaped. They became legends not because they lived long, but because they burned in unforgettable ways. Their graves lie scattered across Los Angeles, in forgotten cemeteries, under marble names few recognize. But at night, when the wind moves through those trees, You could swear it carries their whispers. We were more than our beauty. We were more than our sin. Hollywood was never just a place, it was a mirror. It reflected everything people wanted to see. And everything they wanted to hide. And in that mirror still stands the reflection of those women. Draped in satin, framed in smoke. Their eyes holding the secrets of a century. They remind us that beauty without freedom is just another kind of prison. That fame without love is just another kind of loneliness. And that truth, even whispered through cigarette smoke, can outlive every lie. The longer one stayed in Hollywood, the clearer the illusion became. The fame, the flashing bulbs, the endless parties, all of it was just a fragile dream wrapped in smoke. For the women of the 1920s, the spotlight was both salvation and punishment. When the camera rolled, they were goddesses, immortalized in light. But once it stopped, they were forgotten, replaced, discarded like yesterday's script. Every photograph that captured their beauty also captured their exhaustion. Every smile was rehearsed, every gesture measured, every word weighed for danger. The studios owned them, body, mind, and image. They dictated when they could eat, sleep, marry, or even speak. Their rebellion could never be loud, it had to be elegant, seductive, hidden in plain sight. So they lit another cigarette, drew in a breath of defiance, and exhaled their frustration into clouds of smoke that blurred the lines between who they were and who they were forced to be. Some battles are fought with swords. Theirs were fought with silence. In dressing rooms filled with powder and perfume. These women waged invisible wars, against anxiety, against hunger, against the ache of being watched but never truly seen. There were whispered confessions behind velvet curtains. A trembling hand reaching for another cigarette. A quiet laugh that masked heartbreak. They shared their fears in cigarette smoke circles. That one day, the studio would drop them for someone younger, prettier, more compliant. That one day, the audience would forget them. And the world would move on without even remembering their names. Each puff of smoke became a shared language. A silent promise that they weren't alone. Behind every glittering premiere, there was a contract written in invisible ink. The ink said, "You belong to us." Executives, mostly men with cigars instead of cigarettes, made decisions that shaped the fates of women they barely considered human. They encouraged addiction because it made actresses easier to control. Because a woman dependent on nicotine, on praise, on approval, was a woman who would not rebel. Publicists carefully crafted lies. Stories of perfect lives, romantic adventures, and glamorous habits that audiences would envy, and the public believed it. They imitated their idols, never realizing that what they saw on the screen wasn't freedom, it was captivity made beautiful. One by one, the women who had defined the decade began to fade. Some walked away voluntarily, vanishing into obscurity. Tired of being told who to be. Others were discarded when time and beauty, the cruel currencies of Hollywood, ran out. A few died young. Newspapers called it mystery illnesses. But behind the headlines were broken hearts, overdoses, and loneliness so deep it swallowed them whole. The studios moved on quickly. For every fallen starlet, another was waiting in line. Bright-eyed, ambitious, unaware of the ghosts she would soon inherit. Their legacy wasn't in the fame they found, but in the pain they survived. Years later, when the golden age turned sepia and the world had changed, people would remember them only through images. Frozen smiles, gloved hands, half-burned cigarettes in silver holders. But those who knew, the camera operators, the costume designers, the women who shared their dressing rooms, remembered something else. Their laughter that echoed after midnight. Their small acts of kindness. Their bravery in pretending everything was fine. For beneath the glamour, they were human. Fragile, hopeful, and heartbreakingly real. They were women who carried the weight of a century's expectations on their shoulders. And still managed to create art that outlived their pain. As the sun sets over modern Los Angeles, you can still see traces of them in the fading light. In the old Hollywood signs that creak in the wind. In the dust of the studio backlots where their heels once clicked against the pavement. Their ghosts linger in every puff of smoke rising from a lonely bar. Every time a modern actress lights a cigarette in a movie. Somewhere, the past stirs. Clara, Pola, Gloria, Louise. Their faces flickering like old film caught in the projector. Addiction is never just about the substance. It's about the emptiness that precedes it, the need to feel something when the world refuses to see you. These women taught Hollywood its most painful lesson. That you can't script the human heart. You can dress it up, film it, sell it. But you can never truly own it. Their pain became the foundation upon which modern Hollywood was built. Their rebellion opened the doors for future generations of women. To demand not just fame, but freedom. And though history often forgets their names, their fire still burns. In every woman who dares to be seen as she truly is. The lights dim. The laughter fades. And all that's left is the smoke, curling, drifting, disappearing into the night sky above old Hollywood. For a moment, it feels like they're still here. The women who dared to dream. Who lit their rebellion one cigarette at a time. Who believed the world would remember their beauty. But not their pain. They lived in a time that worshipped illusion. And yet, through the haze of fame and sin, they revealed something profoundly human. That behind every perfect face is a storm. Behind every elegant gesture, a silent plea for freedom. The women of 1920s Hollywood didn't just act. They endured. They built an empire of light while burning quietly in its shadows. And even as the decades have passed, their echoes still shimmer in every frame. Every glance. Every flicker of a woman daring to be more than her role. So tonight, as the screen fades to black, remember them. Not for their glamour, but for their courage. Not for their beauty, but for the truth they carried in secret. Because the smoke may fade, but their stories, their voices, still linger in the dark corners of cinema, waiting to be heard again. Thank you for walking through the shadows of history with me tonight. If this story moved you, subscribe to Lyfory, where forgotten voices rise again, and the past still whispers through the smoke.